Republicans are trying to purge millions of voters ahead of the November election. From state officials removing voters from the rolls to right-wing activists individually challenging voters' eligibility to Republicans filing lawsuits to cancel thousands of voter registrations in swing states, the GOP is trying to disenfranchise voters. I'm Sophie from Democracy Docket. Let's break down the voter purge and mass voter challenge efforts heading into the election. The right-wing focus on cleaning up the voter rolls is just one of the many ways that Republicans are fueling Donald Trump's lies and widely debunked conspiracy theories that there is widespread voter fraud in this country. We've seen multiple states announce the removal of hundreds of thousands of voters from the rolls ahead of the November election, particularly Republican governors and secretaries of state bragging about the large sum of voters whose registrations they've canceled. Ohio Secretary of State Frank LaRose announced the removal of 155,000 voters from the rolls this summer. Texas Governor Greg Abbott announced the removal of over 1 million voters from the rolls since lawmakers passed a sweeping voter suppression law 3 years prior. Oklahoma Governor Kevin Stitt announced the removal of over 453,000 voter registrations in the state. That is nearly 1/5 of all of the state's registered voters. Let's be clear. States are required by federal law to perform routine list maintenance to ensure accurate voter rolls. Normal list maintenance can result in tens of thousands of voters being removed from the rolls due to them moving out of the state, death, or other circumstances that make the voter ineligible. But that process can be weaponized and turned into a voter purge.
So every state, or not every state, before I get the emails from North Dakotans, almost every state is required by federal law to maintain a comprehensive list of all of the registered voters in their state. Okay, in some states it's called the voter file. In some states it's called the voter rolls, right? But it is a master list of everyone in the state who is registered to vote. And this is required to be kept, like I said, under federal law and state laws that sort of parallel that or implement it. But against that backdrop, right, of maintaining a list of every registered voters, obviously over time there are people on those voter rolls who have either died or they've moved out of the state or they've just deregistered. They don't want to be registered anymore for one reason or another, or they've moved and they've changed address. And so states need a way to be able to keep those rolls clean. Okay, that's the term we use. They keep the voter rolls clean. And the way they do that is by doing periodic list maintenance. Now, this has to be done very carefully because you do not want people wrongly removed from the rolls. But list maintenance, if done correctly and done under the right standards and in accordance with the law, is a normal part of maintaining a statewide voter file.
So how does routine list maintenance become a purge?
All right, so a voter purge is like the pejorative term when list maintenance is not done the right way or for the right reasons, right? So as I mentioned, everyone agrees that if someone dies, they should be removed from the voter rolls. And there is a process to do that in every state. But we also agree that you can't use the removal of voters as an excuse to remove live voters who want to continue to be registered in the state, right? You can't purge voters through pretext. So for example, if John Smith moves out of the state, you can't then just remove, 1,000 people named John Smith to try to make up for the one that moved out of the state. And when states do that, when they improperly remove people, when they don't give people proper notice, when they do it too close to the election, when they use all kinds of sketchy data and sketchy processes to do that, it's a purge. And purging voters has been a scourge in our country for decades. And it's done by Republicans, and it oftentimes targets Black voters, Hispanic voters, other minority voters, young voters, people in college campuses.
So there's routine list maintenance and voter purges, but there's also something called voter challenges. The difference between a voter purge and a voter challenge is who initiates it. For a voter purge, it's the state removing voters. For a voter challenge, it is individuals or a group of individuals initiating it.
An overall pattern that we are seeing around the country, and it's not just in Georgia, but it started in Georgia after 2020, and it has had its most pernicious effects in Georgia, but we are now seeing it in at least 9 states as we move forward towards 2024, of people challenging voters who they do not know, who they have never met. This is literally right-wing activists, some allegedly working with the Republican Party, others working with other grassroots organizations, some working by themselves, who troll through voter records and compile these long lists, spreadsheets of names of people who, again, I want to reiterate, these are people they do not know and they have never met. They don't know them, right? But they put their name on a spreadsheet, they send it to the county with a reason for why they don't believe that person should be eligible to be registered or be allowed to vote, depending on the state. And they seek to have them removed from the rolls or have their ballot discarded, again, depending on the state. It is a pernicious effect, second order effect of Trumpism from 2020.
Beyond purges and challenges, there is another route to get voters kicked off the rolls: litigation. Democracy Docket is targeting 27 lawsuits filed this year alone by Republicans and right-wing groups targeting voter rolls. 5 of those cases were filed by the Republican National Committee itself, all of which were unsurprisingly filed in swing states. 2 in Nevada, 2 in North Carolina, and 1 in Michigan so far. Multiple of the other lawsuits were filed by these right-wing legal groups like the Public Interest Legal Foundation and Stephen Miller's America First Legal. Simultaneously, as Democracy Docket's Matt Cohen has reported, there is an emerging cottage industry of self-styled election integrity groups recruiting small armies of volunteers to try and identify registered voters that they believe should be removed from state and local voter rolls. There are large groups coordinating multi-state efforts to challenge voters, like the Texas-based True the Vote and the Cleta Mitchell-backed Election Integrity Network. There's also smaller groups like Pigpen Project in Nevada and North of 29 in Wisconsin. Amid this surge of right-wing voter challenges and voter roll litigation, the U.S. Department of Justice issued new guidance this month for how and when local and state jurisdictions can remove voters from their voter registration rolls. The DOJ emphasizes the 90-day quiet period before elections as required by the National Voter Registration Act. States must complete any procedure to remove the names of ineligible voters from their list of eligible voters no later than 90 days before a federal primary or general election. This issue came up recently in a lawsuit by 2 right-wing activists challenging the voter eligibility of every single voter in Fulton County, Georgia. The plaintiffs argue that the NVRA's 90-day quiet period rule only applies to state-initiated removal of voters, not voter challenges initiated by third-party groups. But the DOJ's guidelines emphasize that this deadline also applies to list maintenance programs based on third-party challenges derived from any large computerized data matching process. The plaintiffs voluntarily dismissed their own case. While this Republican-backed effort to remove voters from the rolls ahead of the election is concerning, there are state and federal laws that safeguard against the improper removal of eligible voters.
It is the job of every one of us to ensure that our democracy functions. And unfortunately, in a world in which you have one political party who is trying to disenfranchise voters through mass challenges and other things, what it means is that we all need to be vigilant. So first and foremost, every one of us needs to check to make sure our voter registration is up to date and that we have not been removed from the rolls, whether it's removed as a result of a voter purge by the state or by one of these mass challenges. So I encourage everyone listening to go to your state or county website, elections website, and check to make sure your voter registration is still intact and is active. Number 2, it's important that everyone have a plan to vote, that you know how you're going to vote. Are you going to vote early? You're going to vote in person? You're going to vote by mail? And you understand what those rules are so that you don't have a later situation in which someone is challenging your ability to vote for a different reason. So I think if we all do that, then we should be okay. But I can promise everyone there are lawyers and activists who are constantly battling these mass challenges and will continue to do so.
Many states' registration deadlines are rapidly approaching. Some are just in a week and a half. So please make sure you are checking your voter registration status ASAP and contacting your state or county board of elections if you run into any issues or have any questions. Thanks for watching Democracy Docket. If you want to stay up to date on the latest voting and election news in the courts, make sure to subscribe to our newsletters. You can click the link on the screen or in the description of this video. I'm Sophie, and I'll see you next time.